Today I'm going to try to draw this view through the trees in Tongyeong, South Korea. It was a quick trip, I know, but today is my last day in town. From here, we will catch a bus to Seoul, stay the night, and be gone by morning. I don't have any plans to draw while I'm there, mostly because I don't have any plans at all. The idea of doing pretty much anything in such a metropolis with so little time kind of just makes me want to put my head in the sand. It's a place I'm eager to experience, but not like this. I think it deserves a proper visit. So yeah, saying goodbye to Tongyeong today. It was a fun experience, however little we managed to do. Once again, every single day we got free stuff everywhere we went. Everyone was incredibly friendly. The weather was nice. Absolutely can't complain. It's a sleepy little town that's not the easiest to get to, but I'd recommend it if you're in South Korea and you want to go somewhere coastal and you want to stay away from everyone. It's out there. Okay, so I took my own words to heart. All that stuff I said yesterday about trees being a good way of conceptualizing how stylization occurs, blah, blah, blah. That stuck with me. Had I not had that enthralling conversation with myself, I would probably never have approached this scene and chosen to draw it. As a reference to me, it looks pretty impossible, save for maybe the view way off in the distance. But as for the foreground, all of the trees, forget about it. But all that talk had me feeling pretty optimistic. So when I saw this, I just kind of jumped right in. Well, first I set up my tripod to film it, and then I set up my camp stool, and then I jumped right in. And I'll go ahead and say it now. Maybe you won't believe it, but this one is up there with the lighthouse from a few days ago. It's not as perfect. Bad choice of words. That wasn't perfect either, but you know what I mean. This one's not as realistic, I guess, but something about it really stands out to me. I'm eager to see what you think. Don't skip to the end, though, please. I know it's tempting, but I'm sure you've heard of delayed gratification. It'll be that much more impactful and special and good for me if you just sit here patiently and just watch the whole video. It's good for your brain as well. So anyway, yeah, I'm happy with the way this one turned out. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on, shall we? So there aren't any clouds on the left side of screen. So you might be wondering what those swirly things are that I've squiggled into the sky. Well, those are the top bits of my tree. They look absurd right now, but that's part of what I meant before. This is, I guess, stylization in action. Kind of an accident, I guess, but in action nonetheless. While I filmed the reference scene, the side on the left side, I was messing around drawing a few vignettes in my pocket sketchbook to try to understand how I would manage those parts of the tree. The trunk is easy enough, the bark notwithstanding, but the leaves are the real hard part for me anyway. I kept starting with the trunk, bottom to top, and when I would get to the tips of the branches, I would try to then draw these bushes of leaves on top, like on top of the finished branch. It took me a few tries, but I eventually realized that you can't see every piece of every branch because of the leaves. When I would look up to assess what I was doing wrong and what I might be able to change, I noticed that if I squinted, the leaves looked like these large clumps, like bushes, and the branches would sort of come in and out of view. This led to something of a revelation, as you can see on the paper. I didn't treat the leaves like leaves at all. Instead, I treated them like these cloudy sort of bushes, planning on coming back to fill in the branches later. So for the next few minutes, I dedicate all of my attention to this tree, since There's nothing here that's particularly rigid or perspective dependent in the rest of the drawing. I didn't bother filling out the general outline of the scene because once I had this main tree, I could plan everything else around it. I kept telling myself yesterday that I could simplify when I wanted to, that I could interpret however I pleased. So even if the tree took up more or less space than it does in real life, I don't think that really matters. The same goes for how much space it takes up versus how much space is left for the background. I knew that if I kept the tree off to the left, really anywhere beyond the midpoint would give me more than enough room to include those buildings and mountains in the background. Speaking of the background, I realized in this drawing that I was getting dangerously close to making a big, unrecognizable mess. Things beyond the trees could become sort of indistinct if I wasn't careful. If I make those background elements too bold or detailed, or both, they could end up being indistinguishable from the foreground. And if I did that, there'd be no way for me to fix it, at least no way that I currently know. I'm sure there are countless ways to ameliorate a problem like this, but I ultimately chose to let those buildings and mountains fade into the background a little bit, meaning I didn't add much else to them beyond their outlines, and I make sure that the trees have by far the most detail. That means that the two layers I have here, foreground and background, won't compete for attention. The trees are the boldest, so they're the obvious focal point. But because of the composition, the trees frame the background components. There's that empty space, which gives them their own little focal point. However, if I gave them the same attention as I give the trees, without any other marker of depth, which I don't really know how to do anyway, I would essentially be bringing all of that stuff forward in the drawing, making it a lot flatter and thus more complicated to delineate between foreground and background. I know this is something like a rule when trying to create the illusion of depth. I don't know what it's called, but it's about giving close things more saturation if you're using color or darkness or clarity or some combination, and giving far away things less. That's at least the basic idea. I don't know when or how I learned it, but it stuck with me somehow, which is how I knew to leave the background a little bit more alone. The next thing I'm doing here is adding some of that texture on the tree. I've already done it. And I have to pat myself on the back for this one. I just let it flow through me, which sounds wacky, but that's what I did. I didn't go into it with realism in mind, but I still wanted it to resemble a tree, obviously. So I focused on vague marks implying the texture. I added a few knots here and there, lots of inconsistency, but boldness as well. Like I said, I needed to keep this tree firmly in the foreground. So giving it some darker lines meant that I wouldn't have to worry as much about how I draw the stuff in the background. As far as shading is concerned, I just added a few more of those types of lines to give the sense that that side is the one in shadow and that's it. I asked you, or me, I guess. I suppose all my questions on here are a little bit rhetorical in nature, but I was questioning how I would create texture and shading on the same spot. I don't know, it must have been at least a week ago. And while this may not be the answer, I'm happy to see that it is an answer and that it came from trial and error, from experience. I've practiced my way into learning a technique, and that gets me really excited. I can't even tell you. So with these trees in the bottom that I've drawn, this whole canopy did start to feel like the first domino falling, like I was about to screw the whole drawing up. There's a ton of detail down there, and I hoped my method with the main tree would translate to these smaller ones, But because they're more of a carpet of leaves, not to mention the light is totally opposite, I was disappointed a little bit to see how different it was turning out as I was drawing it. But luckily, I did the same thing with the branches, leaving them for last, and the trunks. And I think that that actually fixed the issue quite a bit. They still end up looking, a little swirly, like weird random objects down in the corner. But since they loosely resemble the main tree, I think it's clear enough what they're meant to be. As for the buildings in the background, I knew that I was this close to trying to replicate, and you can't see my fingers, they're very close together, trying to replicate each one. I knew that if I spent even an extra few seconds looking at them, I would overthink the whole thing, try to plan out their proportions against each other, and it'd become this whole bloated, unnecessary task. Again, I told myself that I could interpret, but I'm not a photocopier, and that helped a lot. Instead, I drew a pretty general silhouette of some big buildings, planting them all next to each other, just unconcerned with realism. Think of them as suggestions of buildings. As opposed to yesterday's mountains, which took much longer than they should have for simple shapes, these ones I got right into, again, pretty indifferent to their actual shape, much more interested in how they fit on the page and their relationship to the buildings. This drawing feels like a bit of a milestone for me. It's nothing special. None of them really are. But it's in this one that I can feel myself loosening up. And since I've spoken ad nauseum about exactly that, wanting to be able to do exactly that, it feels so nice to see myself get there. I'm under no illusion that this is some new benchmark or floor for me. I know that I will vacillate. I'll ebb and flow above and below this point. I'm sure I have plenty of future drawings that will be disheartening and get me down, but getting to see, specific bits of improvement, especially when it's the stuff I've mentioned, it makes me really happy and really excited for the direction that I'm going. Anyway, yeah, you already know my thoughts on the final drawing. It's practically all I've talked about this whole video. Compared to most of the others, I like this one quite a bit. I'm interested to know what you think, so leave a comment. And also, maybe leave a comment about something that you might like to start. I'd love to hear about it. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this one and every single other one because I know you have, and I also know that you have subscribed. But really, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow.